Hey you guys, so the other week I was talking to my friend Jamie Page and I was telling her that I was feeling very unmotivated and I couldn't come up with video ideas and stuff like that. And she was like, why don't you do your 5 best, 5 worst, which is something that she does on her channel. If you haven't checked her out already, you absolutely should. She uploads incredible content very consistently. That's where we kind of differ, opposites attract. You know? I'll leave a link to her channel down below. So this is 100% credited to Jamie Page. But today we're going to be discussing my top 5 and top 5 best and top 5 worst. I'm so fucking bad at this. Top 5 best and worst, my 5 best and my 5 worst eyeshadow palettes of all time. Just got a text. Let me check out who that is. Oh, God bless. I have a paycheck coming in. So my top 5 best. I think you might be surprised by some of my picks. Possibly not. Number 1, if you've been like an OG subscriber, you've been watching me for a long time, you might see this coming. The Too Faced Original Chocolate Bar Palette. So they were one of the purveyors of the chocolate scent, which is a delight for me. This is the Original Chocolate Bar Palette. They've come up with a bunch of other ones since that are Garbaggio, but this one's fantastic. I've actually repurchased this one because I worked through so much of my other one that I was like, fuck it. I'm gonna get 2. In a lot of my eyeshadow reviews, you will see me mention the same things. And for me, there's a few big things that go into an eyeshadow palette that make it great for me. And that is a good range of colors. So you have your lights, your mediums, your darks, and a good range of matte and shimmer. Basically for me, I wanna be able to use that palette wholly without having to kind of jump to a different palette for, you know, a highlight color or a blending color or whatever. And there are obviously certain circumstances where if it's like a rainbow palette, it's a rainbow palette. It's for color, which obviously you can add with other products. But when it comes to products like this that is, you know, considered a neutral palette, I do feel like because you're going neutral, you should have that good range of product in there. And this definitely does. I like that they have like a huge matte highlight and a huge shimmery highlight. They have some good transition shades through there. And then they have a few nice varying shimmery shades as well. And I used the absolute shit out of this palette. I loved it. I used it so much back in the day. Now I don't use it as much just because I'm using newer things that are kind of coming up that you guys are wanting to see. But this always comes to mind as one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes. The next is probably on everybody's top 5, and that's Modern Renaissance. This palette is obviously such a cult classic. It's such a great range of shadows. You have some shimmers, you have your mattes, you have some darks, some lights, some transitions. But the thing that I love most about this palette, and you've probably heard me say this 8 billion times now, is the fact that they really took the trend of warm eyeshadows and they made it their own. A lot of people were kind of just coming out with the same recycled palette that was just the same tones over and over again, and I feel like Anastasia came out with those pinks and that bright orange and those really kind of like rich reds, and it was just such a unique palette. And I really feel like this is one of those palettes where if somebody's wearing it, you know, like you could be walking down the street, you could be seeing them on Instagram and you kind of know it's Modern Renaissance. And I think to have that kind of level of recognizability is just so iconic that how can it not be in your top 5? I know I need to move past it at some point. Honorable mention of Subculture. I still love this palette. I still use it. And the thing to me is that I just am so inspired by this palette. I feel great every time I wear it. I love how I look. I love how muted the colors are while still being a little bit something more, so you're not just wearing the same neutrals every day. It's just such a brilliant palette in my mind, but I recognize the flaws. Tarte Pro. So I went to Bora Bora when Tarte released this, and then everyone was like, oh, they just fucking like the palette because they're in Bora Bora, which fair enough. But this actually is one of my all-time favorite products. I travel with it often. Oh, fuck. Look how messy it is there. Excuse me. I travel with it often. I use it at home quite a bit. And it's just, I recommend it to everyone. If anyone's kind of like starting out in eyeshadow and they're like, what palette should I get? I'm like, fucking this one. Because it's just such a good palette. Like, it hits all my fucking marks, dude. We've got the shimmers down the side in varying colors, which is nice. You have kind of this one that's like a little more, you know, risque. You have your lights, your transitions, your darks, and then you have kind of like your varying different tones. So we have like the super neutral, more cool tone, more warm tone, and then the more like red toned. And I think it's just such a great starting palette. It's just such a good one to have in your kit. It really kind of hits all those marks. And for me, I just feel like it's the most practical palette you could possibly own. And I really like the formulation, and it smells like fucking chocolate. So this one, I said it the first time I talked about this palette, and I'm gonna say it again now. I did not fucking want this palette when I first saw it. Desert Dusk. I was not enticed by this at all. Like, looking at photos of it, I was just like, no, this is a mess. This is like, I was not the least bit drawn to it. But the more photos that I was seeing of people wearing it and using it and doing swatches and stuff like that, I was like, what? Like, one thing led to another. Before I knew it, it was in my fucking Sephora basket. I don't know what to say. Similarly to Subculture, the thing about this palette is that every single time I pick it up, I feel so inspired and so excited to do my makeup because I don't know why. Like, the thing, when I was looking at it, I was like, this doesn't work. Like, I just felt like there wasn't enough matte shades. I felt like it was going to kind of conflict with each other. It wasn't making sense to me when I was seeing photos of it. It would benefit from a couple more transition shades, in my opinion, but I still think that you're able to produce such beautiful looks with this. They have a really good range of textures amongst these shimmers, which is nice because I think that when you have a palette that has this many shades, I feel like you should have so much selection. Like, it shouldn't just be the same matte formulation and the same shimmer formulation, and that's what I like about it. They have this kind of pressed glitter, they have a couple duochromes mixed in there, they have some more traditional shimmers, and then they have like your mattes so that you can go in and darken and blend and all that kind of stuff. It's just such a gorgeous palette, and I also feel like this formulation is better than the rose gold one. I could be fucking high, I don't know, but for me, I just feel like this formulation has worked out great for me, and I've really loved the colors, the tones, and anytime I see a look with it, I'm like, fucking Desert Dusk, that palette's the bomb. And last but not least, I wanted to mention the Sugarpill Pro palette in my top 5s. So this is like the second edition. They do have the first one that is like black packaging that I'm sure you've seen at some point, but this is the first palette that I reach for when I'm doing colorful looks. The pigmentation is lovely. The way that it blends out is fantastic. They're not too loose so that you're getting kind of pigmentation and rainbow all over your face falling out. They're packed pretty hard actually. So when you first swatch them, you might be almost a little bit let down because we're so used to really soft, buttery shadows, but then we kind of move into the issue where there's palettes like Subculture where when you swatch them, they're incredible and they're soft and they're creamy and they're so unbelievably pigmented, but then when you go to put them on their eye, they're almost pressed a little bit too soft to the point where you can't utilize the shadows in the way that you want to. So these are pressed a little bit harder, which some people might be kind of surprised by, but it allows you to really work with those shadows and blend them out properly and blend them into each other really seamlessly. They just do such a good job. I also like that the pan sizes are a little bit bigger just because I tend to use this a lot as well when I'm like body painting or doing some more kind of like avant-garde looks. I'll dip into some of these as like blush or contour colors, especially around Halloween and stuff. So I like that this is a really versatile palette. If you are a working makeup artist and you've been looking to invest in like a good color palette, I would definitely say to grab this just because it's so versatile, which sounds weird because it's like rainbow colors, but you can use it for really anything, and they really are those like true versions of those colors. So in a lot of palettes, you'll see people kind of doing like muted yellows and muted orange and muted red, but it's not that like full impact, which is so nice to mix in with your other colors, but also for, you know, obviously doing colorful looks. It's nice to have that true blue kind of color. Oh, quickly, I'm sorry, I know that I'm big on honorable mentions, but I want to make this honorable mention since we were talking about color and it just reminded me. The fucking Kristen Leanne palette. You don't understand. You don't get it. I know. I was right there with you. It's such a weird looking palette. It's gorgeous. Like Urban Decay, really, sometimes I question their formulations of certain shadows. These are all beautiful. The matte shadows are beautiful. The shimmer shadows are unlike any other Urban Decay shimmer shadow. Like, they honestly are incredible. I love this palette. It's beautiful. Even if you were buying it just for Corona alone, I would be like, yes, do it, because it's you know, fine. I'll leave it at that. It's a great product. The first was one of the largest letdowns of my life. The Naked 3. With Naked 3, I was genuinely so excited for this palette until I fucking got it. First of all, there's just not much of a good range here to me. I feel like it's like light, random fucking dark, patchy ass color on the end. There are a grand total of 3 matte shades in this palette, which exist here, here, and here. So you're not able to really build up that much depth because you have these two kind of dark colors at the end, but they are so like shimmery and patchy and they don't blend out very well. So you're kind of just stuck with this being your deepest color, which A, means that it's not going to work for that many skin tones, and B, you're basically just creating looks that appear to be the exact same look as the day before, even if you are really changing it up, just because these tones are all so similar when you see them in person, and when you actually have them on the eye blended out and buffed in, they just end up looking so similar on the eye. So I just have an issue with the tone when I feel like you put so many shadows into this palette, but you didn't really make it workable. And then on top of that, it's not even like the formulation is fantastic. It would be one thing if the tones were quite similar, but the formulation was so incredible that it was completely forgived because it just looked so beautiful in eyes. But you have these mattes that are like okay, but you only have 3 of them. You have these weird kind of pseudo shimmery, almost matte looking, like it's such a weird formulation, and they're so fucking patchy. And then you have your actual shimmers that are so patchy, and I just was so disappointed by this palette. I didn't feel like I could make it work with like a wet brush, a dry brush, my finger. Like it just didn't seem to have that impact that I was wanting from it, because I was so excited about the premise of like a rose gold version of the Naked palettes. I thought that was gonna be so beautiful and incredible. And I think they could have, my arm's fucking tired. I think they could have taken that in so many directions that would have been incredible. Like they really could have spearheaded the whole modern Renaissance idea of making it kind of more those actual really rosy tones, but they just kind of went safe in a way, and safe ended up not even being good. I apparently have a lot more to say about what I don't like. When I first was picking products, I was like, I can't even think of any products I don't like. And then now that I'm here, I'm like raging. Urban Decay again, I'm so sorry. This is the Vice 2 palette. I actually had all of the Vice palettes, but I ended up getting rid of all of them, except for this one. So when I was throwing out eyeshadow palettes, all the Vice palettes were some of the first to go, and I saved this one literally because of that silver shade and no other reason. Here's my beef with the Vice palette. So many colors, and yet I have no fucking clue what to do with any of them. I look at these colors individually and I'm like, yeah, there's some nice shades in here. We have some kind of cool blue tones that are like duochrome. We have some kind of cool duochrome purples, but I don't feel like I can use them with anything else in this palette. I feel like I have to literally select one shade from this palette of how many fucking colors? 20. From this palette of 20 eyeshadows, I feel like I can pick one of them, and then I have to use a completely separate palette to use with it. And in this entire palette, there are 2 shades that are matte, which are right there. So the rest are all completely shimmer, including the black, which to me, I was like, okay, well, obviously this is kind of like a more smoky jewel toned palette, which is pretty, but you can't, like, what? This is the darkest shade. That's matte. It just makes no sense to me, and the only reason I bought this palette was because of that color, because I met Makeup Shayla, and the first time that I met her, she was wearing that on her eyeball, and I was like, what is that? And she was like, it's Shell Shock from the Urban Decay Vice 2, and I literally went and bought it the next day, and I only used that shadow, and I continue to only use that shadow. But everything else about this palette sucks. Huda Beauty. I'm so sorry. So the Rose Gold palette. I bought this palette long after the hype of it died down because it took so long to get to Canada. That's cool. I take Canada discrimination well now. I'm used to it. This palette, in theory, is gorgeous. It's like an extension of modern Renaissance in a way. Like we have a really good range of mattes. These are all mattes along the bottom, and then these 4 here are all mattes as well. And then you have shimmers of varying textures around. So it has kind of some of those highlights that, you know, the Desert Dusk palette has, where we have different formulations for the shimmers. It's not all the same. We have some duochromes. We have some more like chilled out shimmers and stuff like that. And we have a good range of mattes. I still use this palette from time to time, but the formulation is so weird. It's weird because I sometimes go back to look at reviews and I'm like, am I fucking crazy? I don't think so. Maybe, because this palette is so unbelievably patchy to me. The mattes are so patchy. I have such a hard time blending them out. I have such a hard time blending them into each other. And the shimmer shades, I just feel like I have a hard time kind of like building them up without having them flake off. Like it's just such a bizarre formulation, and it's so weird because they're not colors that typically people would have issues with. You know, there's just some shades that it's like they always kind of suck, like purples and stuff. I don't know, like, but this seems like colors that should be easy to get right, but it's just weird. It feels like they're pressed so hard. It feels like they don't blend out properly. It's just such a bizarre, dry, patchy formula to me. And I don't know, I'm like, this is genuinely probably the same fucking formula that's in Desert Dusk, but for some reason I'm able to use Desert Dusk no problem. And then I had the same issue with the Obsessions palette. So you're probably like, what the fuck? Because I've been seeing you use that palette like crazy. And genuinely, like I have. I've been using this palette a ton. This is the mauve one. I got all 4 of them. But this is the one that I've been using the most, which is the mauve one. Mauve. Sorry, America. But I still seem to struggle with that formulation coming from Huda. I don't know why. It just seems so dry and patchy, and I just really seem to have trouble kind of building up that color and blending it into each other without it just getting so patchy and fucking bizarre. Last, this is going to be hard for some of you to hear. I know that for some people, this is like one of their holy grail palettes, the Lorac Pro palette. Again, another one of those palettes that in theory should work great. We have our lights, our mediums, our darks. We have a good range of shimmers, so it's all mattes across the top, all shimmers across the bottom in varying shades. The shimmer formulation doesn't change much in my opinion. I think it's just the same formulation all the way through, which is fine. I don't really, number one, I've always kind of not taken a liking to Lorac's branding. I just feel like it's lazy. I'm such a consumer. Like, I'm the first to admit I love pretty packaging. I love cool shade names. Like, I just like things that feel, imaginative kind of thing. And so, you know, when I get something in the mail, like the Kristen Leanne packaging or like this Tarte one with the freaking pebbles on it, like, I'm like, that's beautiful. And I love unique shade names and all this kind of stuff. So when I see the Lorac palette, right from the get-go, I'm not that enticed because I'm like, oh yeah, it's just like Lorac. Also, I don't know if you know this, but Lorac, that name came from the lady who owns it, and it's her name fucking backwards, Carol. And then you open it up, and it's shade names like black, light pink, white. Not even vanilla, white. I also, because it says LT pink, and the first time that I saw this palette, I was like, that's weird that they named it black, white, nude, deep purple, and Lieutenant Pink. I was very confused by that for a time. So anyways, their branding to me just automatically turns me off of their company. I'm just like not that enticed by it. But then we get into the formulation. I also don't find their mattes to be particularly blendable for me personally, and their shimmers are the worst. They swatch beautifully, they blend out beautifully on the eye. When you first apply them, I think they look pretty good. I do have a bit of trouble building up some of the shades, but these shimmers literally flap their wings and disappear from my eyeball in the course of like fucking 35 minutes. For some reason, like they just do not adhere to my eye. It's so bizarre. I normally don't have any issue with it. They are consistently bad for me. They just will not adhere to my eye. I feel like I put them on, I put a primer underneath, I wet my brush before I put them on, I put them on with my finger, I put them on dry. Like, it does not seem to matter. No matter what I do with those shimmers, it's just like they're evaporating off my eye before I even fucking have a chance to put my lashes on. Those are my 5 best and my 5 worst. 5-ish best. Let me know what your favorite eyeshadow palettes have been in the comments below. Let me know what your worst have been. Let's get some arguments going. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, you want to see me cover some other categories, definitely let me know. Thank you again to Jamie Page for the idea. I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace out.